Hi, so on this video, I want to talk about the Turgeon article and early childhood in Ontario. Um, what I think is interesting in the article is to consider in what ways these kinds of multiple ways of looking at policy, both in terms of historical way to look over time how things change and why, but also through that trying to potentially anticipate how one may interact with an environment in order to make recommendations to help people understand the way things change and why, and try to construct, as well as try to construct a kind of a strategic way of looking forward into a process, so that your research, for instance, your case is being done, but now you're trying to situate that case within a larger context, and at the same time facilitate the way for others to see this. These kinds of larger pieces of analysis that looked, for instance, at policy sedimentation, these concepts, right, the sedimentation or punctuated equilibrium or agenda setting or the garbage canned models or systemic changes or windows or coalition agreements, all those become, I think, rather interesting and compelling in some ways. One of the things that I think it is interesting is that traditionally we looked at this punctuated equilibrium as moments of stasis and then a big change, right? And another moment of stasis. Another traditional way of looking at things is the incremental. It's kind of begrudging and kind of difficult and small movement change, right? I think that what is interesting in this kind of sedimentary kind of way of looking is that you start seeing how the work that we've been talking about throughout here, the work on the ground by individuals really engage in that process, but also how they, through organizations or through, kind of vocal communities or through strong advocacy, can actually bring the two moments together. Not to necessarily create huge ruptures, but not necessarily just look so incrementally that we don't experience kind of significant or meaningful change, directed change. But it feels that things change just because the general social kind of engagements change or in a haphazard manner, right? I think that the idea of creating notions such as policy image or the idea of a framing disposition, which I talk also about in my book, the idea of bringing together a sense of capacity for the individuals working and a sense of awareness, both of history and social practice, is really kind of at the center here. So I invite you to imagine, what would be the kinds of images one can construe, right? A whole qualitative narrative research is based on the idea of stories, right? And aggregating and bringing the fullness of stories into play when we talk about providing information. The ideas of shifting, early childhood education, either framed from a sense of helping parents to do work or as really kind of kickstarting the education and the kind of social cognitive capacities of students, conjure different kinds of policy images, right? Of not just what is possible, but also how individuals in an environment could work, what kinds of connections between this specific policy can be connected to other specific policies. And so using that as a frame of mind, imagine, for instance, in your case or in the studies that in areas that you are interested in or environments that you see, what changing the conversation, creating different ways of framing an issue, creating a different kinds of sets of images for a particular engagement could do. When trying to imagine the same case scenario, by paint that in these kind of variants, using those kinds of variants, And let's have a conversation about what potential impacts can be brought over here. Traditionally, this is kind of done in the sense of, well, I have to advocate for a particular constituency, so I'll change my story or I focus on something else. Right here is something that it goes beyond that. And the idea really to imagining the benefits, the possibilities, the process, and the way a whole policy will be constructed or shifted, or the way that change is going to be advocated based on these different frames or different images. Imagine what that might look like for you. Try to bring that into our discussions.